Hey fellas, ever feel like you finally hit a stride after 60? Maybe retirement's treating you well, you've got more time for yourself, the grandkids. You've earned some peace, right? But then, you notice certain interactions, certain people, just seem to drain that hard-won peace right out of you. Sound familiar? You try to be a good guy, a good friend, a good family member, but sometimes it's tough. Well, you're not alone. And what if I told you there's an ancient philosophy, thousands of years old, that gives us practical tools to handle exactly this? We're talking Stoicism. Today we're diving into 5 types of people that can really disrupt your tranquility after 60, and crucially, how Stoic wisdom can help you navigate those relationships without losing your cool or your mind. Stick around, you won't want to miss this. And hey, if you find value here, consider hitting that subscribe button. We explore this stuff weekly. Type 1, the chronic complainers and critics. All right, first up, let's talk about the chronic complainers and critics. So let's dive right into the folks who seem to have a black cloud following them around. The chronic complainers and critics. Now picture this. You meet up with an old friend for coffee. Maybe a neighbor stops by while you're working in the yard. You're feeling pretty good. But then the conversation starts, and it's just relentless negativity. The weather's awful. The government's messing everything up. Their breakfast was cold. Their neighbor's dog barks too much. And maybe, just maybe, they find a little something to criticize about you or your choices too. You see, you walk away from that chat feeling heavier, right? Drained. Like you just ran a marathon you didn't sign up for. It's exhausting, isn't it? What if constantly absorbing that isn't just unpleasant, but actually detrimental to your own well-being? Typically, our instinct might be to jump in. Maybe we try to cheer them up, offer solutions, argue their points, or even start complaining with them just to find common ground. But here's the kicker. Does it ever really work? Usually you just get pulled deeper into the negativity vortex. You sacrifice your own peace trying to fix something, their perspective, that's fundamentally outside your control. Consequently, you feel frustrated, maybe even a bit resentful. But what if there's a more effective, more peaceful way to handle this? This is where the ancient wisdom of Stoicism offers a powerful alternative. You see, Stoicism teaches us something called Amor Fati, a love of fate. It's about accepting external events, the things we can't control, calmly. Crucially, it tells us to focus our energy where it actually matters, on our own judgments and responses. That chronic complainer, their negativity stems from their judgments about the world, not objective reality. Therefore, trying to change their fundamental outlook is often like trying to hold back the tide. Instead, try this. First, consciously limit your exposure if possible. If not, practice what the Stoics called indifference, not coldness, but recognizing their complaints as their subjective view, not universal truth. Don't feel the burden to fix them. Instead, focus internally on maintaining your own rational, calm perspective. Imagine their negativity is like rain. You can acknowledge it's raining, but you don't have to stand out in it and get soaked. You have your umbrella, your rational mind. Let me share a quick story. I have an old buddy, known him for years. Great guy in many ways, but man, could he find the downside in anything? Politics, the local sports team, the price of gas, you name it, he had a grievance. For years, I'd jump in, debate him, try to show him the bright side. And then I'd leave our get-togethers feeling wound up and irritated. So drawing on Stoicism, I tried something different. The next time we met for our regular Saturday morning coffee, as the plot thickened with his usual complaints, I just listened. Calmly, went another word. I'd nod, say things like, I hear you, or that sounds frustrating for you, but I resisted the urge to debate, correct, or offer solutions. I didn't absorb the negativity, I just acknowledged his experience of it. And you know what happened? To my surprise, without me feeding the fire, the complaining often just fizzled out quicker. He'd eventually move on to other topics, or the conversation would end without me feeling like I'd gone 10 rounds. Looking back, I realized I wasn't endorsing his negativity. I was simply refusing to inherit it. I was protecting my own peace, my ataraxia. The lesson: you can be empathetic without becoming a sponge for someone else's chronic discontent. Your energy is precious, especially now. Guard it wisely. Type 2, the emotionally reactive and agitators. Okay, moving on to our second type, the emotionally reactive and agitators. All right, let's tackle those folks who seem to thrive on drama and emotional fireworks. The agitators and the easily reactive. We've all been there, right? Maybe it's a family gathering, and a certain relative loves to bring up controversial topics just to get a rise out of people. Or perhaps it's a former colleague who thrives on gossip and seems intent on stirring the pot, maybe even trying to pull you into it. Suddenly you feel that familiar heat rising, irritation, anger, defensiveness. They push your buttons, maybe intentionally, maybe not, but the result is the same. Your calm evaporates. You get sucked into pointless arguments, your stress levels spike. It feels like they're throwing emotional sparks, just waiting for you to catch fire. But ask yourself, does engaging in that emotional whirlwind ever lead to a constructive outcome? What if you could stand firm, untouched by the storm? Our gut reaction often is to react in kind. We get defensive, raise our voice, jump into the argument, or start firing back emotionally. However, what does this usually achieve? As a result, we often say things we regret, escalate the conflict, and walk away feeling agitated and drained, playing right into their hands if they are trying to provoke. It completely undermines our own sense of control and reason. So the question becomes, is there a way to interact without getting swept away by their emotional tide? Indeed, Stoicism offers a powerful shield. Here's the Stoic insight. The philosophy prizes reason above uncontrolled emotion, what they sometimes called passion. These emotionally reactive individuals are ruled by those passions. Crucially, the Stoics remind us, like Epictetus famously said, it is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. In their outbursts, or their gossip, their provocation, those are external events. Your disturbance comes from your judgment about it, your decision to engage emotionally. Therefore, the power lies in managing your response. Try this. When you feel that emotional hook, pause. Take a breath. Recognize the agitation for what it is. Theirs, not necessarily yours to adopt. Resist the urge to mirror their emotional state. Stick to facts. Speak calmly, or simply state you're not comfortable with the topic. If necessary, calmly withdraw from the interaction. Think of your mind as an inner citadel. You control the gates. Don't let their emotional siege breach your walls. I remember dealing with a particular individual in a volunteer group I was part of. This person, bless their heart, had a flair for the dramatic and often tried to pull others into minor disagreements, blowing things way out of proportion. Initially, I'd get sucked in. I'd defend myself, explain, argue my point. And every time I felt stressed and annoyed afterward. Then I started applying this Stoic principle. One day during a meeting, out of nowhere, they started criticizing a decision I'd been part of, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. Instead of jumping in, I paused, took a breath. I calmly acknowledged their concern, stated the facts behind the decision briefly and without emotion, and then deliberately steered the conversation back to the main agenda item. I refused to take the bait, and the effect was almost immediate. Without the fuel of my emotional reaction, the drama just died down. The person seemed almost deflated when they didn't get the rise they expected. In that moment, I understood. I didn't need to win the argument. I needed to win my own peace. By controlling my judgment and refusing to engage on an emotional level, I kept my inner citadel secure. The lesson here is powerful. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. Choosing reason over reactivity preserves your energy and your sanity. Type 3. The boundary breakers and overly demanding. Next up, let's talk about a tricky one. The boundary breakers. Okay, let's shift gears and discuss those individuals who consistently seem to push past your limits. The boundary breakers and the overly demanding. Does this sound familiar? Maybe it's a friend who always asks for favors at the last minute, assuming you'll drop everything. Perhaps it's a family member who calls constantly, expecting long conversations regardless of what you're doing, or who consistently overstays their welcome. They might disregard your need for downtime, personal space, or simply your stated no. You see, you want to be helpful. You want to be there for people, but you end up feeling stretched thin, maybe taken for granted or even resentful. You feel guilty saying no, but saying yes chips away at your time, your energy, your peace. It's a tough spot, isn't it? But what if respecting your own limits is actually a crucial part of living a good, balanced life? The common path? Often we give in. We say yes when we mean no, driven by guilt, obligation, or a desire to avoid conflict. However, what's the long-term cost? This often leads to burnout, simmering resentment that can damage the relationship anyway. And critically, it leaves us with less time and energy for our own responsibilities, reflection, health, and the things that truly bring us meaning. We deplete the very resources we need to function well. So how do we be both caring and self-respecting? Once again, Stoicism provides a clear framework. Now, Stoicism absolutely emphasizes community and our connection to others, Oikeiosis. It's about fulfilling our roles virtuously. But, and this is key, it also values self-respect and living in accordance with our nature, which includes recognizing and honoring our own needs and limitations. Think of your time and energy as vital resources needed to practice all the virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, temperance. Allowing them to be constantly drained hinders your ability to act well in any area. Therefore, protecting these resources isn't selfish, it's necessary. Here's the practical application. First, get clear yourself on what your boundaries are. Then practice the Stoic virtue of courage by calmly and clearly communicating them. This might feel uncomfortable initially. Saying no can be hard. But understand this. Saying no to unreasonable demands allows you to say a genuine yes to what truly matters. Your well-being, your prior commitments, your peace. Visualize it like building a healthy fence. It defines your space respectfully, allowing for positive interactions at the gate, not constant trespassing. I used to have a neighbor, a good guy, but he had a habit of asking for tools or help with projects right when he needed them, often assuming I wasn't busy. For a long time, I dropped what I was doing, partly because I wanted to be neighborly, partly because I felt awkward saying no. But honestly, it often disrupted my own plans or much-needed downtime, and I started feeling a bit put upon. Finally, drawing on this Stoic idea of courageously protecting my resources, I decided to handle it differently. The next time he came over needing something immediately while I was clearly in the middle of something else, instead of just sighing and complying, I said calmly and friendly, "Hey John, great to see you. I can't step away right now, but I'll have about an hour free later this afternoon around 4. Would that work? Or maybe I can drop it by tomorrow morning?" You know, he was slightly taken aback for a second, but then he just said, "Oh, okay, yeah, later's fine. Thanks, no big drama." What I realized was I wasn't rejecting him, I was simply managing my time and energy realistically. Setting that boundary calmly actually felt better, more honest, and ultimately healthier for the neighborly relationship too. The lesson is crucial. Clear, kind boundaries aren't walls. They're guidelines for healthy interaction. Protecting your time isn't selfish. It's essential stewardship of the resources you need to live well. Type 4, the dwellers on the unchangeable. All right, moving right along to number 4, the folks stuck in the past or lost in the future. Now let's consider those individuals who seem perpetually stuck, either replaying past regrets or consumed by anxieties about what might happen next. The dwellers on the unchangeable. You probably know someone like this. Every conversation inevitably circles back to a mistake they made years ago, a missed opportunity, or maybe even something you supposedly did wrong way back when. Or conversely, they're lost in a fog of what-ifs about the future. Endless worries about health, finances, the state of the world, things mostly outside their direct control. Being around them, you might feel yourself getting pulled into their loop of regret or anxiety. You start feeling down about the past or worried about the future yourself. It's like being trapped in a conversational time machine, stuck on the wrong settings. But here's the question. How productive is it to constantly churn over what cannot be changed or what hasn't happened yet? What if the real power lies elsewhere entirely? What do we usually do? We might try to reason with them, point out that the past is past, or try to reassure them about the future. Sometimes we even get sucked into the rumination ourselves, commiserating over past grievances or future fears. But the result? Often the conversation just stays stuck, and we end up feeling drained, anxious, or regretful, having spent precious energy wrestling with shadows. It distracts us from where life is actually happening, right here, right now. So, is there a way to engage without getting lost in these unproductive time warps? Absolutely, and the Stoics were masters of this. The Stoic superpower here is the relentless focus on the present moment. As Seneca wisely put it, true happiness is to enjoy the present, without anxious dependence upon the future. The past, it's done. Unchangeable. We can learn from it, but dwelling there is fruitless. The future, it's largely outside our direct control. We can plan, prepare rationally, that's wisdom, but excessive worry is wasted energy. Therefore, the only time we have real agency is now. So, how do you apply this? When caught in a conversation looping on the past or future, gently try to steer it back to the present. Ask about what they're doing today, or share something positive happening now. Practice acceptance regarding the past. Acknowledge it without letting it define the present interaction. For future worries, differentiate between rational preparation, what can I do now, and anxious speculation, what might happen. If someone is chronically stuck, you may need to lovingly limit the time you spend in those specific conversational loops. Think of yourself as anchoring the conversation in the solid ground of the present. I have a relative who, especially after retiring, developed a habit of constantly worrying about potential health problems and what-if scenarios regarding finances. Every phone call seemed to devolve into a list of anxieties. Initially, I'd get drawn in, feeling anxious myself, trying to offer endless reassurances that never seemed to stick. It was exhausting for both of us. Drawing on Seneca, I started to consciously shift my approach. During our next call, when the familiar worries started, I'd listen empathetically for a moment, acknowledge the concern. Yeah, it's natural to think about those things, but then I'd deliberately pivot. So what did you do today? Did you get out for that walk you were planning? Or, tell me about that new book you started. I focused on the tangible present, and it was interesting. While it didn't magically cure their anxiety, it often broke the negative loop in our conversation. Sometimes they'd engage with the present topic, Other times, the call would just naturally be shorter. What I learned was that I couldn't control their thought patterns, but I could control the focus of our interaction and refuse to co-sign the anxiety spiral. By anchoring the conversation in the present, I protected my own peace, and sometimes, just sometimes, offered them a brief respite too. The lesson: your attention is valuable. Invested in the only time you truly have. Now, type 5, those who discourage virtue. Finally, let's touch upon a subtle but important one: those who discourage virtue. And last but certainly not least, let's talk about the people who, subtly or not so subtly, seem to pull you away from living your best, most virtuous life. Maybe you've experienced this. You're trying to eat healthier, cut back on drinking, or maybe spend more time reading or learning something new. But then you hang out with certain friends and there's pressure, maybe playful, maybe not, to have that extra drink, indulge in greasy food, or join in on cynical gossip. Perhaps they dismiss your efforts at self-improvement. Oh, don't be so serious. You might feel conflicted, pressured, or maybe even a little embarrassed about trying to better yourself. It's like their influence subtly steers you off the course you've set for yourself. But think about it. If your goal is to live a good, meaningful life, shouldn't your association support that, or at least not actively undermine it? Often it feels easier just to go along. We don't want to rock the boat, be seen as judgmental, or feel left out. But what happens over time? As a result, we might abandon healthy habits, engage in behaviors that conflict with our values, like gossip or excessive indulgence, and feel a sense of disappointment in ourselves later. Our progress towards personal growth stalls, potentially impacting our health, clarity of mind, and overall well-being. So, how do we stay true to our own path while still navigating social situations? Unsurprisingly, Stoicism offers clear guidance on the importance of our choices and associations. For the Stoics, the ultimate goal isn't pleasure or external success, it's virtue. Living virtuously, primarily through the 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, sound judgment, justice, treating others fairly, courage, facing challenges, and temperance, moderation, self-control. Therefore, anything or anyone that consistently pulls you away from these virtues is hindering your path to eudaimonia, or human flourishing. This isn't about judging others harshly. Remember, Stoics believe people act badly out of ignorance. It's about wisely choosing your influences. Practically speaking, pay attention to how you feel and act around certain people. Do they generally lift you up or drag you down? Seek out company that inspires you or, at minimum, respects your choices. Crucially, practice temperance in your own actions, regardless of what others are doing. Politely decline that extra drink, skip the gossip session, stick to your healthy choices. It takes courage sometimes, but it's essential. Think of it like choosing the right fuel for your engine. You need quality input for optimal performance. I used to be part of a regular poker game. Good guys, fun times. But over time, I noticed the conversation increasingly drifting into really cynical territory and a fair bit of mean-spirited gossip about mutual acquaintances. And honestly, I found myself getting sucked into it, saying things I didn't feel good about later. At the same time, I was trying to cultivate a more positive and less judgmental mindset, inspired by my Stoic readings. And so I faced a choice. Instead of just stopping going, I decided to try influencing the dynamic subtly. When the gossip started, I'd consciously try to steer the conversation elsewhere. Ask about someone's kids or talk about a game or a project. If the cynicism got heavy, I'd often just stay quiet rather than chime in. Additionally, I made sure I wasn't initiating that kind of talk. And you know what? While I didn't single-handedly transform the entire group dynamic overnight, I noticed I felt better after the games. I wasn't carrying that negative residue. Sometimes others would even follow my lead and shift the topic. It was a reminder that while we can't control others, we absolutely control our own participation and choices. Choosing not to engage in what diminishes virtue protects our own integrity. The lesson: your character is shaped by your choices, big and small. Align your associations and actions with the kind of person you aspire to be. So there you have it. 5 types of people that can potentially disrupt your peace, especially as you navigate life over 60. The chronic complainers, the emotional agitators, the boundary breakers, the past-future dwellers, and those who discourage virtue. But the key takeaway, the real power offered by Stoicism, isn't about labeling or cutting people off wholesale. It's about recognizing patterns, understanding the dynamics, and most importantly, focusing on what you control: your judgments, your responses, your choices. You can protect your inner tranquility, your ataraxia, without building walls. Ultimately, these later years can be incredibly rewarding. By applying a little Stoic wisdom, you can ensure your relationships contribute to, rather than detract from, your peace and purpose. What do you think? Have you encountered these types? How have you handled it? Drop a comment below. Let's learn from each other. And if this resonated, give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more practical philosophy for modern life. Thanks for watching. Stay strong, stay virtuous, and I'll see you in the next video.